Morning, everybody. Thanks for being a little bit of an early bird.
Good morning.
Morning, Laura. Morning, Todd.
If you can just let us know you hear us okay, can see us okay. Just say hello to us in the chat. We see your names. Just want to make sure that you can hear us.
Todd says,
Awesome.
yeah.
Okay, thank you, Todd. And
Laura
Laura
might
for
be like
joining.
grabbing a cup of coffee before she settles in.
Yep, for sure. I'm going to share my screen so we can um, just make sure everything else that we're planning is functioning, and there are my apps. Okay,
Looks good.
yep. So let me Okay, so what we're going to do is just as people are coming in, we're going to have a little fun prompt, and it should show up if you're on desktop on a computer. It should show up on the lower right-hand side of your screen. You're going to get the ability to participate in like a little polling question. And
Slido.
so we're going to, let's see here, launch that. You should get a little question. It's the same question that's on the screen that I'm sharing.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let me get my chat window and move it to the other side, and my Slido, move it to the other side. Okay. Everything look good so far?
So far, so good.
Okay. All right. So if, for those of you that are here with us, if you see this question on screen, go ahead and participate and, give us your reaction to this whole pumpkin spice hype.
Um, Karina, it
Mhm.
says on my Slido, voting closed. Good morning.
Oops.
Laura from Houston.
Open voting. Here we go.
There we go. Much
Oh,
better.
thank you for that.
Yep. Got you back.
All righty.
You have a pretty split, evenly split audience of pumpkin spice. Getting a good range across the board.
Yep.
I feel like I like the smell better than I like the taste. That's where I'm gonna
Okay.
land on that.
Yeah.
I like the atmosphere it creates, but then I'm like, most of the time the drinks that flavor is in from coffee places is way too sugary for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the
Yeah.
spicy smell is
And the
very
smell,
seasonal.
you're probably more reacting to the spices anyway than so much the pumpkin, right? The
Yeah, I mean
nutmeg,
it's
the
really just
cinnamon, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
cinnamon, clove,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Nice fall, warming fall, winter
Yep.
spice.
I love that. Yeah.
Good stuff. Well, we know Slido works on our nice little
Yes.
mini test. Always good to test those systems out. And we'll start in a couple more minutes. It's still 2 minutes ahead of the hour. Thanks for coming in. Oh, yeah, I bet it's chilly
Oops.
where you are, Lisa. And folks, if you want to put, I'm going to open the chat so I can take a look. If you want to put in the chat where you are and how is it going? Laura's, it's chilly in Houston, chilly in New York. It's, for California, it's chilly. I mean,
It's dry where I'm at. Is it where you are in Northern California? Is it dry, windy?
we get some fog, but it's been kind of more dry, crisp cold has
Yeah.
been what we've been getting, which is pretty classic
I
for
have my
November.
hand lotion handy because
Yeah.
reapplying, reapplying.
Moisture.
Yes,
It's
it's
dry.
that dry.
Yeah.
I think I like the pictures, videos of snow, like the image of
Hmm.
snow, but I don't know that I can survive 40 degrees. So,
Or 49 even from Laura in
yeah.
Houston.
Yeah, and especially what Todd said, 22.
Yeah. I mean,
Oh,
at least you're, in double digits still, Todd. So
yeah.
something for Utah this time of year. Okay, we've got about another minute, and we got some folks with us, but I know a bunch were signed up, and hey, that's why we record these things.
Exactly.
I'll give it just another minute or so, and then we'll jump into our pretty fun material and topic today.
Exactly. Yeah. It's exactly on the hour. We have a little interactive question that should show up. If you're on a desktop computer, it should show up on maybe the bottom lower right corner of your screen, a little Slido question. Feel free to participate in that. We were just asking people to rate the pumpkin spice hype that takes over this time of the year. So it's the same question I have on screen, but you should have the ability to interact. So let us know what you think, and also feel free to just say hello in the chat while we wait for others to join us.
Casey's in Kansas, and they had their first snow there a couple of days ago. So, season's greetings to Casey
Yep.
for snowy time of year.
Yes.
In most of California, we choose to drive to the snow when we want to in the mountains, in the
hmm
Sierras.
I think for me, I have the relationship with snow that people would have, like grandparents would have with their grandchildren.
Yeah,
Like, yay, it's so cute. Oh my gosh, here,
small doses.
take it back, and then and then go back home.
It's starting to melt. Hand the
Yes,
baby back.
exactly.
Well, we've got 10 folks, including Todd and Lisa. Shall we get rolling at least with the intros, and then once we get into the meat of
Definitely.
the topic, I think we'll
Yeah.
have everybody settled with their cups of warm, fun beverages.
Perfect. So I will leave the Slido question there for those who join us. You feel free to participate. I'm going to move the slide though, the content of the slide, but the uh, question should still show up for you. So welcome today. We are doing creating volunteer descriptions with strong foundations. Thank you so much for joining us. This is our second session for the month. So if you are here as a repeat from uh, last week that we presented, or you weren't able to attend and are joining us today, welcome. And my name is Karina Vargas, and with me is Dana Litwin. I will
Hi.
let her introduce herself first, and then I'll give my introduction. Go ahead, Dana.
Yeah, thanks, Karina. I'm Dana Litwin. Been part of the VSys Voices for a couple of years now. Hopefully, those of you who've done our webinars before, I usually host and facilitate, and this is really Karina's spotlight show today. So I'm just delighted to help keep up with the chat, add a few ideas and thoughts. I recently did some videos and some material on the same topic, and we realized this was going to be perfect timing to host this wonderful session together. So thanks, Karina, for having me here
No,
today.
thank you for having my back on this one and being able to share your insight. I really value what you had to share in our last one and all the content that you put together on your YouTube channel. So thank you for your expertise. I'm the solutions architect here at VSys, and for those of you who haven't met with me before or interacted with me previously, I actually came from volunteer management, managing volunteers in a healthcare setting the last 10 years before joining Visas and previously in other settings. But I'm happy to join the team to do things like this, but also meet one-on-one with clients and help them get better use of the system. So thank you for joining us again today. So I'm going to take us into just explaining a little bit of what to expect today. In a recent survey that we did, we got some really good feedback from participants, so we really appreciate that. And they were sharing with us that they'd really like to know a little bit more about the level of content or maybe the target audience when we're hosting these webinars. So I'm putting this slide on the screen so that you can understand who we're targeting today. So today we're definitely targeting what I'm referring to as the learner and the proficient, the person who feels that they're maybe still in a learning phase in volunteer management, maybe has, and I just put like a number, maybe 5 years experience or so. You have some experience, but it's not necessarily extensive, that you're still in that learning phase, or the person who has had some experience in volunteer management, even stepped into some leadership roles. I think they would really benefit from this. Not to say, Dana, that the expert can't benefit from it. It's a good reminder, right? But just wanted to be kind of honest about who we're targeting here. Anything you want to add to that, Dana?
Yeah, I think, there's always a chance to learn at every level in your career, and we also want to make sure that this is tuned into the issues that you might be having with writing these descriptions when you're kind of like early or mid-career. But, everybody's always welcome, and I think we also, Karina and I also learn from you when we have these discussions. So I think it's
hmm
just a great learning journey together.
Exactly. And with that too, kind of laying the foundation expectations for today, I also want to share with you all the objectives for today. So I feel like I'm writing a high school essay. Here are my 3 points. And
What
then,
I did on my summer vacation.
exactly. Here are the 3 things that I did for summer vacation. Tell it and then do a conclusion. But this is what we expect to target today or share with you today. First, exploring the importance of establishing a formal volunteer description. We'll talk about the difference of having sort of an informal volunteer role versus a formalized description and what that does and how important that can be for your program. We'll also talk about some fundamental elements, the actual components of a volunteer description, and what is the difference between one that's just sort of slapped together and one that really is has a little bit more thought into it, has more intention, and that can be what we consider a strong volunteer description. And lastly, presenting how different aspects of a volunteer description really lend themselves and connect to other areas of your volunteer program management. So how they help you be a more effective leader in volunteer management. All right. Anything you want to add to that, Dana?
Yeah, I think you've covered it pretty well. And this is really the description of the volunteer role can be the make or break decision moment for people when they're self-selecting and choosing where to put their time and their talent. So it seems like I've seen this be too simple. I've seen some be too complicated. And I think, Karina, you found the Goldilocks zone of this is just right, of just
Yes,
enough information and detail to get people interested and set and meet expectations so they know what they're getting into right away, and enough curiosity left that they're ready for like next rounds of communications and again to go on their learning or training journey for the role with the agency. But a well-written description can really improve your recruitment a lot. And we've been hearing and we know from research evidence, not just anecdotally, that this is a really challenging time of a labor shortage. So every little thing you can do, every tiny adjustment or update that can help your chances of getting the right people into the right roles is going to be extremely valuable.
exactly. Yeah, definitely. And what we have to share obviously are best practices from, what Dana said, anecdotal and also research-based, evidence-based, information. But these are all just suggestions. There isn't necessarily a rule or a law that things have to be done a certain way. We'll talk about legal things that are connected to volunteer descriptions, but these are all just suggestions, best practices that we've picked up in our experiences. So again, thank you for being with us. So I believe I have one more question here for you. Since we're talking about elements of volunteers, I'm going to stop the Slido question and just get your interaction for another question. Let me get us launching that one here. And I'm gonna open that up. Okay.
And you should see
All
your little
right.
Slido button you should see the Slido poll on the right side. And if for some reason you don't, you can also answer the question in chat, and I'm keeping track of that.
All right. And I was just thinking elements of volunteer description, and I just thought in the season, what are the elements of your Thanksgiving gathering? I know we have some people from the States, and so we are looking forward to our Thanksgiving, and we have also had people from up north, from Canada, who already had Thanksgiving. So tell us what the future looks like. Tell us how Thanksgiving went. That's sort of
From
also kind of what
October 1st,
exactly,
an urgent message, get more
ex
gravy.
yes. Food, I love whoever put family. I know sometimes we're thinking about turkey, stuffing, all that, but yes, definitely want family because then you don't want to be stuck with the whole turkey by yourself.
Oh, the turkey trot. Yeah, 5K or like a walk or a hike. My family tradition used to be having a big hike and a lot of open space near where we met at my aunt's house, and so that was a pretty fun experience to walk it
Oh,
off.
I
I
love that.
Yeah, some people did a shorter hike before to get hungry, and then some people did a shorter long hike afterwards, but it was just like group one eat, group two. It was pretty fun.
I love that because then you are, really effectively combating stomach coma because you
Exactly.
just
Nap attack.
exactly. Yeah, awesome. So I'll leave that up for you guys to keep moving forward or answering that question, but I'm going to take us into our next slide. So we were talking about the importance of having a formal volunteer description. So you might be asking, can I just ask people to come in and just kind of figure things out? Yes, that's certainly one way to do it. That's what we would refer to as an informal volunteer role. And it works in some scenarios in some industries. We've come across people, Dana and I, and even Lisa and Todd, who are also our team members working with different volunteer leaders. We've come across different industries and scenarios that maybe an informal setting or an informal description might work out. But let's kind of take an example here. Imagine that you are moving, and I really hate
I'm
moving.
going to do that next week
Oh
for week of
no.
yeah, no, in a good way. I'm moving, but
Okay.
yeah, it's stressful.
Yes, it is stressful. Well, I have a little bit of trauma behind moving because my parents were moveaholics.
Oh,
They always move. I probably had like 6 elementary schools because of moving. But imagine that you asked your friends to help you move, and several of your friends come over, they volunteer and they show up. They probably have a broad expectation that they're going to help you maybe carry things out. I mean, that's what I would think if Dana, if you asked me to help you move, if it was in my neighborhood. I probably imagine that you'd want me to help you carry things out, from your old place or maybe into your old place.
mhm.
But I would be really shocked if I showed up to someone's house who asked me to move and they said, "Oh yeah, here's a box. Can you put all my clothes from the closet inside my box?" I would
Yeah,
be
you're
kind of
here to pack my stuff that you know nothing about and not actually do the thing I said you were going to do. Yeah.
exactly. That would take me by surprise. Like, oh, okay. Or if I came to someone's house and had my big truck, because again, my expectation is help you take things out and put things in. But all of a sudden you're asking me to, you know, uh, just fold up wrap your china in newspaper. Like, oh, I mean, yeah, it's kind of part of the move, but maybe not what I was expecting, and I would feel underutilized considering I had a big truck, and
Yeah.
you're
And
not asking me.
that's a bait and switch too. Yeah.
Hmm.
You're not setting or meeting expectations.
Exactly. So would they feel maybe taken by surprise or feel underutilized? And so that's sort of the things that you might come into. I know this is a silly scenario, but that might be those feelings of either feeling like that bait and switch that you referred to, Dana, or that surprise or not the expectations were meant, or feeling unutilized can happen if you have an informal volunteer role versus actually establishing a formal volunteer description. And so there are several benefits to having a formalized volunteer role. And there's 3 things here on the screen that we're going to be discussing. First, the connection and how it's a great communication tool, and it's also a great accountability tool. So those are 3 great things that you can expect from a formalized volunteer description. So first, connection. The volunteer description, a really strong volunteer description connects the volunteer not only to the tasks, right, the to-do lists, Dana, but
Mhm.
also our mission, our vision, and our goals. People want to feel like they're part of a larger picture. Why am I paper clipping packets and making folders? Or why am I sweeping this dirt? Or why am I, standing and handing out flyers to someone at some entrance? Like whatever the task is, what is the bigger picture, and it helps them feel like they're part of something larger than them, and so it gives a little bit more meaning to the tasks that they have on hand. What do you want to share about that, Dana?
I think, the biggest piece of feedback I've had with doing surveys with clients and large organizations and agencies that I've worked with previously, directly being a leader of volunteers, the way that people want to feel recognized and understand their role is being valued and understanding the meaningful impact to the
Hmm.
mission that their actions are having as, again, part of that whole team. So I've worked in with Project Open Hand was my entry level as a volunteer coordinator. So you would think nobody wants to come and chop onions. We had a waiting list of people waiting to chop onions because they knew that it was important, and they turned it into a fun teamwork thing of how do you not cry. There were the goggles team, there was the step into the freezer, cold air on your face team. And so they almost gamified themselves with that connection to a task that most people wouldn't want to do at home on their own. So I think having that connection and that understanding of where they fit into the mission and the impact of their work that's like the foundation of good volunteer engagement.
Exactly. And a volunteer who is engaged is also more likely to stay with your organization. And I'm not saying it's a silver bullet. How do I get my volunteers to stay? But connection is a huge part of that, feeling that engagement. So the second point here is communication. A strong volunteer description is a great communication tool because it clearly explains the expectations. It defines obviously the scope of work, but it also explains any prerequisites, any requirements that they have to fulfill or maintain, maybe annual, CPR of this or that, or, every 3 years, first aid certified, um, you know, or doing annual training or compliance, whatever industry it is that you're coming from, the participants that are with us today, wherever it is that you are coming from, I'm sure that you have your expectations from your organization or your industry. And so communicating that to the volunteers is very important. Also, explaining to them who they're going to be in contact with, in communication with, who are they going to be reporting to? And that's really important because are they just going to be someone that comes into your organization kind of feels lost, or do they know the point person, either if it's by name or by position, the uh, shift lead or the manager of the program manager, like who is it that they're going to be in contact with? That's really important. And why that's important, communication helps us build trust. And if we're building trust, then we can, again, still build a connection and the engagement and things like that. What are your thoughts, Dana?
I completely agree with that. And my recent Tuesday tips was specifically talking about onboarding volunteers and having that clear communication of quick reply to their first
Mm-hmm.
inquiry, then a clear communication of next steps with additional details that weren't just in the recruitment listing and what happens next. And again, I recommend, in that communication in that second step, here's who your team members are, here's who you're reporting to. Ask me a question. If it's not the actual manager of volunteer services, you feel free to come to me with any questions. And I also like, for accountability, setting up like a buddy or mentor or friend system so people feel welcomed to a team and part of something right away instead of that high school cliquish feeling. So I feel like
Yeah.
setting that up, setting new people up for success by, hey, here's the person directly on your team you can ask questions of. Here's your buddy for the next month or whatever timeline you decide is best for the role. And I think that helps with accountability as well and
Yeah,
connection.
exactly that connection, right? They get to know who else is going to be there. And I agree with you about those like high school cliques. I've seen volunteers come in feeling lost and then all of a sudden feeling like they're a part of the team and they don't want to miss because their Tuesday morning buddies are going to be there, and they have that camaraderie and it's amazing.
Chopping
So
onions with
exactly.
goggles on,
Exactly.
team goggles.
So the last thing, the last benefit you just want to make a note of when it comes to formalizing your volunteer descriptions is using these descriptions as an accountability tool. So not only does it communicate expectations, but also is what you can use to hold your volunteer accountable if they're not meeting expectations. If in your program either you practice, performance evaluations or just evaluating the work. Are they coming in? Are they doing what they're supposed to be doing? Or are they also following boundaries? I know that this was something that was important for me when I was working in healthcare and working with volunteers in a preschool setting. Um, just the kids, because I was in a pediatric healthcare setting. People say, "Oh my gosh, I just love the kids," but their shift was 4 hours, 12 to 4. And why were they here at 6 o'clock? Why were they here 3 times this week? Developing boundaries, especially when you're in the helping professions, is really, really important. I think sometimes people make the mistake of feeling, well, the more I can help, the better. But I'm not going to go into, why boundaries are important, but they are. That's probably a topic for another time. That's really important. It can help. So these descriptions can help you have those difficult conversations with people. It takes sort of the subjectiveness out instead of saying, "Hey, Dana, you're lazy," because that's never the way you're going to approach it. It's, "Hey, Dana, I've noticed that your shift starts at 8 o'clock, but you've been coming in at 9 o'clock. Can you tell me a little bit more about what's going on?" So it's very objective, it's very sort of factual, like this is what is written, this is what you signed, but I'm not seeing this happening. So it makes it easier. I'm not saying that easy, but easier to have those
Easy.
conversations.
It's all relative. Yeah.
Relative for
Yeah.
sure. But I know that in another conversation, Dana, you and I had, you also mentioned how descriptions are an accountability tool for the leader too. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And so for the agency, this is again, this is a two-way relationship. This is transformational and not just transactional. So the volunteer coming on board needs to understand not just, oh, they're only giving stuff to the agency, like what's the balance back? What kind of support or resources or fun things or benefits? Like there's a potluck social twice a year, when the weather is good, whatever that is, it is a two-way relationship. And there is responsibility, of course, on volunteer coordinators and managers of volunteers to have good communication and to be transparent if there's a policy change or something else is going on. And that, again, that continues to build the trust and continues to build the foundation of their connection with your agency. So it holds both of you accountable. And I like listing a little bit from each party in the
Hmm.
description itself. Like, here's what you do for us. Here's what we do for you. Here's what we expect. And then nobody's got any bait and switch or surprises around the corner.
Exactly. Yeah, being very clear as those expectations need to be clear from the very beginning. Thank you. So let's actually get into our second objective is to discuss the different elements, the components of a strong volunteer description. And so like many of the houses in your neighborhood, and hopefully where you're moving into is the case as well, Dana, congratulations, on the move because it's a good thing.
Yes.
So no two houses are the same, right? Unless you're in a community where it's just model homes are kind of copy paste. But even within, every home, there's different designs, there's different elements. And so I bring that in that symbolism or analogy because your volunteer descriptions might look a little differently. I mean, they might be the elements might be ordered a little differently, or you might decide to maybe not include some elements, or you might even be mirroring the style, the design that your HR department is using for its employees. That's another suggestion that some people offer is to look at what your HR is doing and try to model that as much as possible. But so the following screen here are some of the components that we are suggesting. And so there are components or elements of your volunteer description that we think are important that are visible to the volunteer. But there's also components that are great information for you to have that are a little bit more behind the scenes. We said we put them in as optional internal elements. And so we're just going to quickly go down the different elements and just describe them a little bit more to you and why those are important. So first off, your job title. And I know in volunteer management, we kind of go back and forth. Should we use the J word or not? But just a title, right? So give it a title.
Mm.
And so, I mean, I know it's very obvious and very basic, but selecting the right title, that's your first thing. That's what's going to, really capture someone, being creative on how you do that. And Dana, you said this before, saying volunteer.
That's
That's
not,
not
yeah,
your title.
volunteer is not a job description. Volunteer is a legal pay category. And
Mm-hmm.
Laura in Houston says we've settled on service description. So I think, yeah, you can say volunteer, you can say service, you can say team member,
Mm-hmm.
whatever feels the most inclusive and is kind of resonates with the mission of your agency. What's the jargon in your
Yep.
industry, that kind of thing. But yeah, volunteer isn't a job description. And too often I just see a recruitment like, we need volunteers. I'm like, oh, there's a lot to unpack of how that's not going to be as effective as saying, we want, a junior zookeeper age 14 to 21 to join the summer program and teach younger kids
Exactly. Yep. And also with these titles that we're choosing, being careful that we're also not overlapping
with staff. Yeah.
with the
With
staff
paid
position.
people. Yeah.
So if your organization, let's say, has a receptionist role, and that's someone's paid title, probably don't want to choose that for the the title. So it might be, reception assistant,
Yeah.
something like that, or
Front desk information, specialist, something like that.
yes,
Yeah.
something that doesn't copy from your paid position. That's really, really important. So the next area we have is the summary or the purpose of the role. Summary is a great way to quickly describe what that role entails, and you can really use these little snippet for recruitment postings, and also post or even write about the purpose, what it's actually, why this role was created, what's the genesis of it, or what need it's addressing. So I've seen that in some recruitment postings for volunteers, just a little short paragraph. It's not the full listing because I'm like, oh, that's it's a little too much for the eye, right? Have you seen those as well, Dana?
Yeah, I usually find that, about a paragraph, maybe 3 or 4 sentences, maybe six, is pretty good for a summary and description. And that leads into not just the summary and purpose of the role, but I think saying purpose of the role ties directly into what is the mission impact that this person is having
Exactly.
on the big picture for the whole agency. How is it helping clients, constituents, the community? Like how does it fit in there? And that can take half a sentence or one sentence to just say, you're helping prepare food that provides healthy meals for homebound critically ill people. Ta-da!
Exactly. Yep.
Chopping onions. Yeah.
Exactly. It's giving a little bit more of the why, right? And that
The
connection
why is
to the bigger
important.
picture. Exactly. And I love what you said, the mission impact. Describing what the benefits for the volunteer would be is definitely helpful. Oftentimes we'll just describe me, what we need, we want the volunteer to do, but we forget we're actually trying to recruit someone, and as much as we believe that people just volunteer out of the goodness of their hearts, what's in it for them? That's also going to be in the back of their mind. They may not, um, say it openly like that, but they're thinking it in the back of their mind. What is the benefit for them? And it can be, anything from uh, the opportunity to gain experience in a certain thing, or maybe where you're at, there's a free meal or an entrance to a special event, the opportunity to participate in something, or the networking with some of the key staff. So those are really cool things. What are some of the cool benefits that you've seen in some of volunteer descriptions, Dana?
Well, when I started with Project Open Hand in the early 2000s, the nickname for it for volunteers and the paid employees was Project Gain 10 Pounds, because we had chefs from the local Le Cordon Bleu school cooking our meals for us every day. So even though like it was constant food and groceries, meals and groceries, meals and groceries, but then everyone got like a really, really high end meal on their shift, and that snuck up on you. There's, butter makes it better. There was a lot of
Yes.
that. And with open space agencies, it's such a growth career for climate change and environmentalism that I was just having a conversation with a couple other colleagues yesterday about this, that they can be competitive as a career entrance point as well. And that's true in healthcare, that, things start to look good on your resume. So as people are shifting jobs and moving around and figuring out what fits best for them, a lot of times joining an agency as a volunteer is perhaps like a savvy career move as well.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. The next thing here we have is tasks, responsibilities. Obviously, this is a big chunk of your volunteer description. What is it that they're going to be doing? Really setting those expectations, like we mentioned before. If they're going to be assisting or working with staff, adding those words like assisting or performing supplementary tasks. This is another place too that you really want to be careful that you're not duplicating, copying a job description, a paid position, and just sort of copy paste. That it's worded so that it has that volunteer essence, that it's not a paid position, they're assisting someone. I had a volunteer once who was helping in our our what is it, the laboratory.
Blood bank,
Yeah, blood
laboratory.
bank. Yeah, like a laboratory. And they were
Yeah.
assisting in setting up rooms, cleaning up afterwards, walking people in. And I think they wanted to say that they were assisting with blood draws. Like, no, you
Technically,
weren't,
no.
you were not drawing blood.
Yeah.
Let's be clear on what you were actually doing. You were prepping rooms for sure, assisting the technicians. Yes, that is, but they were not doing blood draws
Yeah,
or
you are neither
assisting.
a phlebotomist or a vampire, so yeah, put
Exactly.
it on your resume that you're those two cool things.
Exactly. So that's really, clear to have. Anything you want to add to that?
I think we covered it pretty well, and that does tie directly, I think, into the spoiler alert next one of
Mm-hmm.
qualifications and skills required, because that's going to match up to the tasks. And I think something that's important to keep in mind is there is no such thing as small tasks, and
Mm-mm.
it's good to establish a culture of volunteers as part of the team and not in any way lesser than paid people. It's like, yeah, there are clear boundaries between tasks and responsibilities, but someone can be and this happens in healthcare, as you know, Karina, someone can be a nurse or a doctor in one section of the hospital and choose to go volunteer with the kids or bring a therapy animal, their trained dog, in another section on a completely different shift. And that happens
Exactly.
across all kinds of industries and sectors.
Exactly, exactly. So thank you for leading us into the qualification skills. I think this is vital, obviously, for finding the right fit. If you're looking for someone with specific functional skills, interpersonal skills, or even some kind of knowledge or experience, and so those are clearly stated on there. But also, what are the qualifications or requirements as they get into the role? Do they have to maintain some kind of compliance or initial training or annual training? That's really clear because sometimes, and you shared this with me, Dana, in
Mhm.
our interactions, is that might be the kind of the make or break for a volunteer to say, hey, you have to attend 20 hours of training. Maybe.
Maybe that's not possible in someone's
Mhm.
schedule. Um,
Exactly.
I want to point out Kayla has a great thing in chat, and I'm going to read it out loud. But Kayla,
Yeah.
if you want to come off the mic, that's fine too. Kayla says, "Is it best practice to share our full volunteer descriptions at the point of volunteer application so that they can identify which positions interest them?" Absolutely, 120% yes. That's the whole point, is help people screen themselves and self-select what they resonate with and what they're qualified to do and what they're interested in doing at that first point of contact. If someone has to get to 2 or 3 points of contact to figure out what's really going on, they're going to be frustrated and you've just wasted your own time and theirs. So yes to that. And Kayla also has a really great comment in chat that note that pre-COVID, her organization had 150 plus unique volunteer positions. We imagine as we rebuild, getting back to that number and likely more. We previously had a significant list of volunteer opportunities, but not full volunteer job descriptions on the webpage for the public to view and let us know what they are interested in at the time of applying. Unfortunately, that list seems to be overwhelming and might scare interested volunteers off. And she's asking, how do others list or navigate providing volunteer positions info at the outset? Well, I've got my answer to that. Karina, you've got
Yep.
your answer to that. We
Hmm.
invite the rest of you to put your answer in the chat. But I've also worked for agencies that have anything from drop in for 5 hours to commit, to being an educational docent for 5 years. And so
Hmm.
it can be overwhelming. And rather than having it be a really dry search engine, it's like, yeah, this is a page for information if you want to search for something, but your recruitment for each type of position or department um, should be targeted to a specific audience that's most likely to respond to it. So rather than expecting people to go into an overwhelming database of job titles and then try to figure out and click on which one they want, your recruitment shouldn't just be that thing on the web page. That's a second or third step. That's something
Hmm.
else that someone can dig into. Your recruitment should be posted wherever you're posting it elsewhere online in a way that has interesting and attractive visuals. So if you divide it out to, this is working with kids, this is working behind the scenes, this is working outside, help people self-select from these larger categories and then they can dig deeper. And if you're specifically recruiting, for example, you're in healthcare and you want nursing students, then yeah, you're recruiting at the local colleges and universities, and you're on online interest lists, and you're
Yep.
going into social media threads or chat rooms or posting with certain hashtags that are going to grab the attention of people from that demographic to
Yep.
come and work with you.
Yeah, amen to all that. And, to the second power, all what you're saying, Dane, I think I completely agree. Instead of like this giant list, organizing it, some people even take the approach of when they're recruiting someone, asking for what kind of skills or what kind of
Exactly.
community,
What are you
who,
interested in?
what are
Yeah.
you interested in? Tell us a little bit more about, do you like to work alone? Do you like to work with groups or small groups of people, large groups of people? So finding a little bit more about the person as well and tying that into how you've cataloged, organized And this isn't a technical training, but there are many ways within VSys. VSys 1, you don't have to have Anywhere or Live, but there's many ways in VSys that you can create those categories. We call them either job tags or connect certain skills, preferred skills or mandatory skills. And so those can help you, better select a position. And we'll also talk about this just in a little bit. There's also ways to organize your roles so that they're more like entry level positions. And then once some people have kind of been there in your organization for a while, then maybe they can kind of go into a second tier position or third tier. We've heard of people doing that as well. So what you said, Dana, organizing it either by working with kids, working with animals, whatever, or based on maybe level of experience, those would all be a great way to do because I can see that being overwhelming, 150 positions.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So,
Hopefully that helps, Kay. Yeah, Kato
yeah,
says amazing insights. Thank you both. Yeah,
yep,
and we'll have a little time at the end for open discussion and we can troubleshoot stuff for you.
perfect. Yeah. So time commitment, kind of tied into skills and qualifications. Obviously knowing what the shift coverage is, or if you have a minimum expectation of hours, or again, the training, how long, or if you expect them to be there 6 months, 1 year commitment, all of those can be included on there. I want to get your feedback, Dana, on the location and work environment. I know you have a fun story with penguins, involving penguins you can share with us about the importance of describing location and work environment.
Right, and we'll link to a longer video I did on this, like a 10-ish minute video. But I worked for the San Francisco Zoo in 2008, 2009, that era. And when I arrived, they had huge turnover and not enough recruitment for one very specific position, which was socializing penguin chicks, socializing baby penguins. And I believe the official job title was, baby you know, penguin chick cuddler or something. They tried to have the person before who was there a couple years before me tried to have a cute name. But what was going wrong with that is you get this very Disney animated musical idea in your head of like, I'm going to cuddle a cute little baby animal. It's going to be delightful and fun. And the reality is these are aquatic and Arctic creatures. And so their environment in the back of the house, away from their exhibit in the back room where the chicks are raised and socialized, it is a cold, damp cement room. And so people were showing up in business casual, khakis and blouses and button up shirts and getting smelly and getting damp and being uncomfortable. And you're sitting on cement and your back goes out. And baby penguins, like all other penguins, they eat fish. And so what comes out of their nose and other orifices is very fish smelling. So it
Mm-hmm.
was physically rather uncomfortable thing to do. And people, there also wasn't an explanation as to, well, why are we putting people through like torture for 2 hours in a cold damp room with a tiny stabby thing? And there wasn't an explanation of how this connected to conservation or the zoo's mission or why it was important. So I just, again, I added like barely a paragraph to the description, but I made it really transparent and clear that wear grubby clothes. We also had a little budget. We invested in rubber mats on the floor to make it more comfortable to sit. We had a few extra $2, rain ponchos if people didn't bring grubby clothes or they wanted that extra protection. So again, here's what the agency's doing for you to try to make you more comfortable. But I also crucially added, here's why this is important. We have to socialize penguins when they're this age or baby chicks so that it's safer for them and their veterinarians and their keepers and handlers when they're adults and stronger
Mm-hmm.
and more dangerous. Because, quite frankly, an unsocialized, normal, wild as they should be penguin is a stabbing football. It's something with an ice pick on its face that doesn't want to do what you want it to do when it needs a shot or a checkup or something. So it actually was really important to the animal safety and the staff safety and why we want to conserve this species of penguin, and they're going endangered with climate change. So the first round of communication still had, here's what's expected of you, here's what it's like to be there, here's how long it is, here's the shifts available, here's why it's important, here's the dress code, here's what we suggest you wear, and here's how you become involved. And suddenly within about 3 months, 4 months, we had a waiting list of people because penguins are only chicks for a certain time of year. So it was a very seasonal position, and it kind of became like everybody trying to get on the list to be a chick cuddler for a few months out of the year, and it just turned into a huge success with that tiny
Yeah.
change in the job description.
But people coming in knowing and not being
Yep.
surprised and then staying right for the position. So really describing what not the environment, right? But also just, if obviously being in a smelly, cold cement is not the volunteer location or work environment for your volunteers, for those
You
of
don't
the
have to do it.
attending,
Yeah.
they don't,
Go
yeah,
do something else. Yeah.
exactly. But even things like having use of stairs, use of elevators,
Hmm.
because sometimes we'll just location, third floor, okay, of this building, and we'll kind of just, but there's a lot of opportunity to really be more descriptive about what that is, standing, sitting, things like that.
Yeah, and
So
I've
that's
worked with
important.
agencies where there's a lot of work that has to be done outside by interpretive docents, not just at zoos, but in parks and rec and land trust associations where they're outside or they're hiking for three
Hmm.
or four. And we had a fantastic volunteer who was in a really tricked out wheelchair, who was one of our best trail patrol public interactors that we had. And so again, making it as accessible and as clear as possible, and then people can say, yep, I have a tricked out wheelchair and I can totally do this, instead of making the assumption that, oh, you have to walk or ride a horse or
Hmm.
ride a bike. It's like, no, you just have to move yourself around the trail at whatever pace you want to and talk to people. And Bob was excellent, stuff like that.
Perfect. Yeah. So moving on to the other elements, who they report to obviously is important, like we mentioned before, in establishing that communication and then building trust. So you can give a the specific person, so a name of a person, if that's always, the same person, or even just the position title. Again, it could be something like a shift lead, but who they are going to expect to be engaging with the most, or if it's like maybe lead volunteer,
Hmm.
things like that. And so for a volunteer that's just joining your organization, knowing who to go to and get guidance from is really important, so they don't feel like they're, just sort of lost in the larger scheme of your organization, depending on how big your program is. I know the program that I was at one point was up to 1,200 volunteers.
Hmm.
Can't tell you that I knew every single person, but I'm glad that our volunteers knew who they needed to talk to. It's important that they know who to go to, right?
Exactly.
So the last thing is the acknowledgement or signature. So finishing up the description with kind of some kind of statement that the person is reading and understanding, that they've read, that they've had a chance to ask questions, things have been clarified for them, and then maybe formalizing it with a signature. Now, I know not everyone practices the signature. Again, it's not a rule that you have to, have that. But for me, I like to consider that as best practice, because again, you can say, hey, remember you signed it, this, if you needed to come to that conversation, just, hey, you agreed, or some kind of acknowledgement, an
Mhm.
initial, that they understood the position. So anything you want to just wrap up with our what's visible to the volunteers, Dana?
Yeah, and I think for signing something or having a volunteer agreement or release of liability, just because of the nature of the agencies I've worked with, where it's nature and it's animals and it's outdoors and sometimes there's hazards, we've usually done that as part of an onboarding step. Although we've made clear what are the pros and what might be dangerous. It's never super dangerous, but what are the risks and things in the description. So it just depends on your agency. You may have it completely automated and they're kind of in a portal in your volunteer management software system, for example, or on your website, where they're like, oh, that looks good, and I'm applying for this, and I'm signing something that I'm applying for it, but then there's the rest of the process. So wherever that signature is in the process, just making it clear where that point is, where it's a point of commitment or a point of understanding that they're acknowledging.
Exactly. So we have other optional elements for volunteer description. This isn't necessarily something that we're saying that you should put on the description that the volunteer gets to see, but it's certainly information that we think you should be capturing and maybe cataloging on your end, whether it's in the volunteer management system or in some kind of record. I always think it's important to see who is it that authored, if it was one or more people, or who was it specifically that put this together. Where I was at managing volunteers in healthcare, departments would come to us and ask us for a volunteer. And so we would give them the responsibility of creating the volunteer description. And so it would be, who was it that authored that? Because they would also have more information, if there was ever questions, or if ever you were in this process of reevaluating positions, we would see who would authored it, and then we even added who approved it, our director or a manager, who approve that and noting that. And again, that's something you can easily have in VSys. Now I have some questions. Is there any questions we want to
Yeah,
bring up
so
from the
so
chat? Yeah.
Kayla has another great question. Thank you, Kayla, for like being the star today. And do other orgs need to get their legal compliance team involved if there's a signature? Probably yes. I'm not a lawyer, but I play one on TV. Is my classic, I can't give official legal advice, but most of the agencies that I've had that have any kind of contract or even legal department or compliance department or HR, I run it past them.
Exactly.
I gathered enough expertise from doing it many, many times over 20 something years that I'm really confident that something I'm going to draft up for a volunteer agreement is going to be approved by legal. And I've had really serious discussions with legal when an agency was suddenly opening up volunteer opportunities to youth. And so that was several months of negotiations and research and kind of proving to them that this is okay if we do it this way. But that's something to have on your checklist again, especially in something that's really regulated like healthcare or government agency where
Hmm.
I've worked before.
Exactly. And on the next few slides, we're going to also talk about when you're creating a volunteer description, how it really opens you up as a volunteer leader to connect to other areas in your organization or other stakeholders, I guess, or people that you want to get some feedback for, and legal being and compliance being one of those as well. So just to kind of finish off this slide, we have last next review date. So if you practice reviewing your evaluations in some kind of timely fashion, once a year, twice a year, whether it's a rolling date or every summer you take time to reevaluate your descriptions, just noting that and kind of having maybe the system, if you're putting that into visas, remind you of when it's time to review a certain document, just to kind of look, make sure everything is good, nothing has changed, especially after COVID. I've heard a lot of people saying, we used to do this, we no longer can do that, we've now had to do this other thing. And so there's been some changes. So documenting when that happened, and also related back to the mission impact that you've mentioned before, Dana, is what are some of the organizational or program goals that this volunteer description is meeting? So what are we targeting with this? What in this position? What are volunteers? Is this volunteer description meeting a certain goal for our program?
And it should
And
be tied into every volunteer role, whether it's visible initially to the volunteer or not, but you should understand how it supports mission impact. It should be tied directly to a strategic plan, to pillars in the healthcare industry. We've had several really successful webinars with Visas Voices about social determinants of health and
mm-hmm,
tying your healthcare hospital volunteer metrics directly to funding for social determinants of health and HCAP surveys. But in other industries, again, I come from a huge background of conservation and some food security, which has different kinds of strong regulations, and really making sure that you understand and can communicate to anyone else in the agency who doesn't understand, including your bosses or board members. This is how volunteers are supporting these strategic goals and mission of the agency directly.
exactly. Yeah. And then lastly, any measurables or metrics that you are capturing from the volunteers. And so we have some people that when the volunteers are clocking out, aside from just the time that they spent there, they maybe are reporting how many people they interacted, how many things they'd handed out, or how long, well, that's time, but I was going to say how long they spent doing a certain task, but if they break it up, or what type of tasks they did during their shift.
Mhm.
And so if those are metrics that you're capturing, just having a note of that as well.
And I've had
Okay.
some agencies, again, particularly government agencies, where there's a whole program management system that I, as the administrator of all the volunteer programs, I know is occurring, and I can communicate that to volunteers, but it isn't sometimes it's their responsibility to enter things into the VMS portal, and sometimes it's mine or someone else's that I've delegated. But just understanding that if you're only measuring hours worked of or years of service, that is barely the floor. That is the bare minimum of data to collect, and there's so much more that is impactful on the organizational structure.
Yeah.
So speaking of Slidos, about this
Mm-hmm.
same thing,
Yeah. So I have a question on screen here. I know that we gave several elements, a lot of elements, that we're suggesting for a volunteer description. And I'm saying the question is, what elements do you believe are the most important? Maybe I can even rephrase and saying, what elements are you going to start with? That you feel like you are at least going to tackle initially or to review. So I'll leave that Slido coming on the screen there and go ahead and answer that while I move us into this one of our last slides here for today. So we mentioned that a strong volunteer description really there's elements in there in the description that really connect you to other areas of your organization, other programs, that gets you really thinking as a leader to think strategically about things. And so what we did on this slide is kind of listed maybe other people, other departments, other resources that different areas of the volunteer description connects you to. So I'm kind of just going to quickly go through this so we have a little bit of time to answer any more questions. But when creating that job title, you're thinking legal compliance, human resources, things like that. Do you want to mention, and feel free to jump in, Dana, if there's any one of them you want to add anything to. Um,
Yeah, and I
mhm.
think just in general for all these categories, and this is recorded and you'll be able
Yeah.
to access the slides and everything and review it. But making sure that you are talking to other departments where these volunteers are working or their work impacts them, and that actually helps create a greater understanding across the agency of the value of volunteers. They know that you as a leader of volunteers are thinking really strategically and in detail about how this fits into everything. So again, this is a pretty easy checklist or chart to
Mhm.
help you go through, but it's breaking down silos of communication, I think, is the best end result of this
Exactly.
entire slide.
Yeah. So anything from marketing, recruitment gets you thinking about awards and recognition, performance evaluation. Under qualifications and skills required, this is where I mentioned that tiered placement, where you can say, entry level position, second tier, third tier, based on some kind of experience. Um, the time commitment, monitoring boundaries, risk management. The where you were talking about the penguins, Dana, about
Yeah.
location and work environment, I
Yep.
can really see, risk thinking about it through a risk management
Hmm.
point of view. It's not just third floor NICU department of this one hospital. With my experience in healthcare,
Hmm.
it really looking at it through a risk management perspective, right?
Yeah, and what does happen when
EDA, yeah.
someone is injured by an animal at a zoo or a wild
Hmm.
animal, or they twist their ankle on a trail leading a docent tour, like that's part of it as well, and that also involves, compliance or legal or that release of liability of what's covered for the volunteer, and what isn't. And again, I tend to work in really dangerous dangerous situations and search and rescue and stuff like that. So my stuff might be a little more intense, but you know,
No, but it also gets you thinking about some of the safety training,
yeah.
right? How do you manage
Handling
the
blood, body fluids,
Mhm.
cleanliness, hygiene, COVID hygiene. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, where I was at one point the hospital opened up a brand new building, and this was a new experience for me to go through what they call fire life safety training.
Hmm.
And it was a huge, beautiful building and brand new. And I was thinking, yay, doors open, everyone just come in. Well, before they could open it, they had to, every volunteer and every staff had to go through this training, which was basically a tour, but it was a tour with purpose. It was, ooh, look at how pretty this new department. Here's the exit. Here's the firewall doors. Here's the fire extinguishers. Here's, the AEDs, the defibrillators on the wall. And so it was going through a tour of here's your nearest exits, here's your panic buttons. So that's part of the safety training that we had to go through in that environment. I'm sure there's, other types of safety trainings that get you thinking. And then the reports too, just to kind of wrap this one up, and I know I kind of went through this slide a little quickly, but also gets you thinking about stakeholder management and really building relationships with the people that your volunteers are connecting to. Many of them are overseeing volunteers as an added responsibility to their everyday job, and so they may not have the best practice information for volunteer management. And so maybe educating them or working with them, building that network with them to help them better manage the volunteers if they oversee them instead of you directly, and strategic planning as well. Anything that you want to add to kind of wrap up this slide, Dana?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've covered it really well, Karina, but even just starting to think about this stuff improves your management, improves your career position because anyone else in the agency knowing that you're thinking about this, like you're starting to get recognized as uh, even more of a leader than you already are. And so again, I think this is beneficial to volunteers, it's beneficial to you, it's beneficial to the agency to kind of have this quick chart as like, how can I improve this communication and relationships and the understanding of the impact of the volunteer program for everyone else in the organization?
Exactly. So with that, kind of talked about our three, here's my high school essay. And in conclusion, we talked about some of the benefits of having a formalized description, some of the components of those descriptions, and then also how they tie in and really get you thinking a little more strategically as a volunteer leader. So what questions do you have for us? So you can use the chat to ask your questions and we'll address them there. And as you think of those and write them, I just want to share that we have a couple resources for you. We're listing some resources on here, as well as I'm going to actually stop sharing for a second because I want to make sure that I am able to share a document with you, and then
Mhm.
you all let me know. Let me stop my little Slido because we're done with that. But let's see.
And again, these will all be posted on the Visas Voices resources page. You should be pretty familiar with that. If you're not, go to the Visas One website. It's right there. And we'll have a recording of either this session or last session and all of the notes. And the file will also be able to be downloaded there. But I think altogether, this is
Yep.
some really great new tools in the toolbox and just things to think about. And again, take what you need and leave the rest. Not every single thing's going to apply, but hopefully this is a nice bunch of things to choose from.
Exactly. So I'm not sure if it's showing up for everyone that I was attempting to share a file with you, but I'll share it on the screen in just a moment. And it's a template that we're offering is just a suggestion. And we also have a little sample as well. Oftentimes you might probably find the design template from your organization, but just have here on screen. And I know it's small, but again, we are sharing this with you, and we will also follow up today's webinar by sending this out via email. And it's in a Word document, so it's totally editable. But just an example of kind of I just created a hospice bilingual, multilingual companion is the role, but it's a hospice volunteer.
Mhm.
And so it kind of have that description there, and then a little template for you to start off with. So we
Yeah.
have that as well for you.
And I'm just going to address a couple of questions in the chat that are really, really great. Kayla again, and then Laura. So Kayla asks, is it best practice to co-develop volunteer descriptions with the areas that want volunteers placed? Yes, and that leads into Laura's question. As a department of one, Laura says, it's difficult to find the time to write an amazing service description that will draw people in. And I put in the chat kind of a solution to both things. Either I've created a volunteer services or position request that staff fill out for their departments, and then they send that information to me. So kind of they're writing it up because they're the person working directly with the volunteer. That's one solution. The other solution that applies to both is that I said to Laura, then delegate create with trusted volunteers a recruitment committee, and they draft job descriptions and they reach out to other staff members and other departments if you're just overwhelmed. So delegate, delegate, delegate. You have the
Hmm.
most headcount in your department, probably of anywhere else in your agency. You are probably in charge of more people than any other department, and there are a lot of different skills besides the ones they're using with your organization. So Laura, if you put out a quick survey like, hey, I'd like to form a recruitment committee to support my work and the work of the agency, you will probably get a pretty good response. And then you know their personalities. Then you can sort who you want to put
Exactly.
on that team and then hand off some of this kind of stuff that they feel, then they're very invested. And so if they're also helping to lead or supervise some of these teams or positions that they're helping write the descriptions for, or they're reaching out to other departments and staff members to write that description, then it becomes more of a team effort. And
Yep.
we also have do you have success stories or solutions related to engaging and training the programs and department staff? We do, and
Hmm.
that's in upcoming webinars, so VSys
Yep.
webinars, and I have a lot of material on that. So
Yep.
again, I'm
A quick
happy
answer
happy
to
to
that.
reach out to us, and go ahead,
Yeah.
Karina.
Yeah. A quick answer to that is we used to host what we called lunch and learn.
Mm-hmm.
You know, feed them, and then just kind of half hour, really short training bites, and also kind of coming together. So, hey, just want to go do a quick training on how to address this type of thing that's coming up. Also, thank you for being so great to the volunteers, and here's lunch,
Yep. Yep.
one
Yep.
idea.
Yep.
Um, so again, we're going to follow up by giving you, we're going to be posting this the video online, the resources, the slide deck, and the file as well. Thank you so much, everyone, for being with us today. Thank you. And we hope for those of you that are here in the U.S., we hope that you have a wonderful holiday next week, and that you take that much deserved, much needed time to get a little R&R, right?
Yep, exactly. And if for everyone else not celebrating an American Thanksgiving, stay warm and dry and safe and happy, and take care of yourselves. This is a good season to remember your own self-care, not just learning. This is a really busy season for a lot of us in this sector. So take time for yourself, and a few deep breaths, and a warm cup of something delicious.
Yep. All right. Be safe, everyone. Take care.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.